Hey everybody, welcome to week 4. It's hard to believe that we are on week 4 of this study. I know we've been here together for 5 weeks, but the reality is this is the 4th week of the teaching material. So this week we're exploring reasons for creation, the reasons for the existence of a creation, which ultimately points us to reasons for existence of a creator. These arguments kind of line up more with an intelligent design backing, which is great and a great starting point to engage people in dialogue. There are some very passionate people who believe in evolution. There are some very passionate people who believe in creationism. And there are some very passionate people who believe they don't know what they believe. But the key evidence is to lay out some reasonable arguments, but as we've said throughout this study, to do so with gentleness and reverence. 1 Peter 3:15, I'm going to say it at the end of the video too. Always be prepared to give an account of the hope that is within you, yet do so with gentleness and reverence. Hey guys, even from the get-go tonight, remember, when we make arguments, when we have discussions, let's do so in a manner that represents Christ, that points people back towards Jesus. We don't want to win an argument but lose the opportunity to share Jesus with somebody. Much better that we would, quote, lose an argument or have to come back and talk again than miss the opportunity to share Jesus with them. Please don't ever forget that. Well, tonight we're going to jump right in with the cosmological argument. The cosmological argument is a reasonable, logic-driven argument that kind of lays out some steps. So let's follow with it. I'm going to read it off so I make sure I get it. If you're following along on your note sheet, I've got my own right here. You can read it off here. Cosmological argument. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. It didn't just come out of nowhere for no purpose. It came with a reason. Something or someone directed it to happen, and there's power behind that and purpose behind that. So the first point is what? Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The second thing is just a statement of things that we can observe. The universe began to exist. We'll look at some scientific arguments in a moment, but the universe began to exist. Therefore, point number 3, the universe has a cause. The universe had a start, had a beginning, but also had a purpose behind its beginning. It's not just random chance and happenstance, but rather there is a designer, there is a creator who began this universe and gives us this place that we have. I love this, by the way, because this just follows right in line with how God created everything. If you look out, if you go outside, which I would encourage you to do, go outside at night and look at all the stars. You'd be like, there are a lot of stars up there. Because there are, especially if you get out into the country or you get out where there's not so much light pollution, you just get overwhelmed by how many stars there are. How could that have just happened by happenstance or by probability? The numbers are astronomical that it would all happen by random chance. Look at a waterfall. Look at the fingerprint on your thumb or on your finger. Look at how detailed and intricate it is. Take time to examine the structure of a leaf. Take time to look at these things. There's order and there's purpose and there's design behind it. One of my favorite passages comes in 1 Corinthians, and it tells us that we serve a God who is a God of order, not chaos or confusion. And that reminds me, look, there is definitely order in all the things that we see, and there's a logic and a reason behind that. So don't forget that. When you start thinking, well, maybe it did happen by random circumstance, go outside, look at God's creation, and just be amazed by it. Think about how springs bring water up, but then that water then goes down. Water doesn't flow uphill, it flows downhill. There's gravity. There's all kinds of things that are just amazing when you get to thinking about it. And it reiterates the fact that there is purpose and there's a plan behind all of these things. Well, let's keep moving forward because I want to make sure that I don't lose you in the process of this study. All right, so moving on down. What are some scientific evidences we have for there being a beginning? Well, the first one, and I may blow you away a little bit because you're like, Alan, can we talk about that at church? Yes, we certainly can. Remember, science is based on observation, and science can change over time. But science is based on observation, and oftentimes what we see is that science will ultimately come back around to what we believe with faith and what we trust in with God's word. But I hope you hear this. When we hear the word Big Bang, we're not talking about the TV show. We're talking about the idea that came out in the 20th century about there being a Big Bang. Scientists were able to discover that the universe continues to expand. Now, you say, well, Alan, why is that evidence for a beginning? Well, think about it. If you've come in a YouTube video or a movie, right, sorry, I'll go back to rewind it, and you go back to the inception point, the point that it began. Sometimes you hit that little button and it goes back. Have you ever hit that button on accident, by the way, and lost your place? You're like, dang it, I have to restart the whole video. Guilty, which is kind of frustrating because then you try and move it along forward and it just drives you crazy. But the reality is when you come in the middle of it, you look back and you can see that there was a point when it began. When you see that it is moving outward from a point, you can tell that it had a point that it started with. So the Big Bang actually gives us this idea of there being a beginning and that everything originated from a beginning and it's now mushrooming out from that beginning point. If you think about it, you throw a rock in the water, the ripples that come out. Well, those ripples didn't just happen. They happened because a rock went in the water, and then from that point that the ripple or the wave begins, it goes bloop, 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 and it carries on out. The same thing about the Big Bang effect. It shows us that there was a beginning. Now, again, does that argue for creationism? I don't know that it necessarily does, but it can be an evidence, again, pointing us back to the necessity of there being a beginning. We still good? Hopefully so. All right, moving on. The second thing that we have is the law of thermodynamics. You say the law of what? Right? The law of thermodynamics. Now, this is a law that basically says that things will move from an area of higher pressure to lower pressure. And you say, Alan, that's great and all, but what does that mean? It means it moves from a place where it's compressed to where it will ultimately settle out in equilibrium. All right, I'm starting to track with you. Think about it this way. If I had a balloon, and I'm so sorry, I couldn't find one. I looked, and we cannot find balloons in this whole church. But if we take a balloon and we blow it up, you get this big balloon, right? Sorry, that's my really, really bad miming. Get this really big balloon. You hold it, and you release it. What happens? Well, it goes nuts, right? Until it doesn't. When it ultimately runs out, what does it do? It goes and it falls, right? And it stops because it's reached a place of equilibrium. Things go from an area of higher pressure to an area of lower pressure. You could also look at it this way. It runs out of fuel, right? And when scientists look at our universe, they see that with the expansion that we are running out of fuel. Now, don't let that freak you out. Don't be thinking, oh no, when's the sky going to fall? When's the universe going to deteriorate? When's it going to turn to dust? Look, scientists estimate that is still incredibly long, far, way, way, way off. But the reality is, you can look at our sun. Our sun has expelled so much fuel already. But that means that it had more fuel to begin with. And that means that as it's moving through, that one day it will be out of fuel. Long way off in the distance. Something that we ourselves are probably not going to have to ever deal with. Lord, we hope not. But the reality is that one day it will. And so we look at that and we don't freak out, but it points us back to the idea of it started in a different place than it is now. So we can tell that it had a beginning so that we can get here to where we are currently. Crazy? Absolutely. But it does make sense. All right, let's move on. So we've got some scientific evidences. Let's move on to talk about some philosophical evidences for a beginning. Okay? When we look at this, we're going to look at two different things. One of these is this idea of infinite regression, which I'm going to insert a video right here.
So now you've got 3 lines of evidence. Let me give you a fourth. This might cause you to stretch a little bit. This might explain how you might have the beginning of space and matter, but how do we explain the fact that we believe we are in a universe in which time also began at the beginning? Really? Time has a beginning? Yeah. You hear that expression all the time, before time began, but they're actually, it's kind of hard to say that because can you use a word, temporal word like before, if there's no time to measure before with? But the point is, I want you to look at it this way, like a racetrack. This is called the law of infinite regress. Imagine you're on this racetrack, and I put you at the starting line, and I say, okay, get ready, all of you. We're going to have a race. This race is wide enough, the track's wide enough that all of us can run simultaneously. Wouldn't that be awesome? Some of you in this room are really fast. Some of you are pathetic old people like me. I can tell you who's who. I can see all you people, okay? I can tell you who's probably going to win. And what losers are in the room? I tell you right now, I can see you, okay? If you've got gray hair, I'm sorry. You're going to come in toward the back. I know. This is the way it is. That's me too. Now, if I put you on that track and I said, we're going to run to the end of that track, there's a finish line, and the first person to get, but we're not going to, there's no curve. What if this racetrack went off into the distant woods out there? It went off infinitely. What if that was the track we had? It went off infinitely past the finish line and infinitely past the start line. It's like an infinite racetrack. That's what you're standing on, at the starting line, and you're getting ready. You put your blocks in the ground. You push them down, put your little, you're set, you're good. You put your feet in the blocks, you're ready to take off. I get my starting pistol up in the air. I'm ready to start your race. You ready? Get set. Stop. I'm not going to go. I want you to do me a favor before you start. Everyone back your blocks up 6 inches. Really? Yeah, just do it. Okay, you do it. Ready? Set. Stop. Back it up 6 inches. Are you kidding me? Yeah. And then every time that I'm about to start the race, every time, rather than let you get started, I tell you to stop and move your blocks back 6 inches. I never let you start. I make you move your blocks back infinitely. Are you ever going to get to the finish line? Think about it. Are you? No. If there's no start to the race, you're never going to get to the finish line. What if the finish line is just today? If there's no start to the race, you don't get to the finish line. And if there's no start to time, you can't get to today. The fact that we are at today demonstrates that there's a beginning to time. Are you with me on that one? Law of infinite regress. We know we are in a universe in which space, time, and matter has a beginning. So here's our diagram. We didn't even talk about helium, which we could, or mathematics, which we could. I just want you to see the case is, remember Dennis talked about a cumulative case? When we do these in front of juries, they look like this. They are cumulative cases built on several lines of evidence that all point to the same conclusion. Now look, people will say all the time, well, Jim, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't think. How do I know that I hear objections all the time. And by the way, atheists do not like the idea that we have a beginning to our universe. They are working hard to get rid of the beginning. Because if there is a big bang, there's a big banger. We've got to explain what that is. And the big banger has to be non-spatial, non-material, non-temporal. So it's already starting to sound like God. So they've offered other alternatives. And they're all lame, okay?
I don't know about you, but I sure like the cold case Christianity explanation of that. I had an explanation with dominoes, and it was going to be really crazy. And I said, you know what? These guys explained it way better than I can, so we're going to be thankful. Essentially, it comes down to, in order to have time, in order to have all these things, there had to be a beginning. Beginning. I always like to go from this side to that side, right? When it comes down to it, or actually that side to that. I don't know, whatever y'all see. But the reality is it had to have a first start or a first cause that would get it to where it continues on. You can't merely have infinite back because there will be no initiation to begin with. Say, who started it? I don't know. It's like being on a track, right? If you never have a start, you're never going to have a race. So if you see that there's a race going on, there had to be a beginning to the race that's in progress. Even if it goes on for infinity, it still had to have a start for it in the midst of that. I know that's like hurt my brain kind of thing, because you have to be something outside of time to be able to start something in time, which again points us to our need of having a God who is greater than time and greater than all of these things, who could begin all of this. Just saying, it's there. The second thing we see is the fine-tuning argument. Now, this is kind of cool, and I want you guys to think about this. The fine-tuning argument points us to the fact that everything exists in such perfect balance that it points to it would not have happened by random chance. Now, Sean gives this illustration. He said this: can you imagine going on a hike and you're running through the woods and you discover an abandoned cabin? And once you come into that abandoned cabin, you go in there, you're like, man, I'm kind of hungry. I wonder if anybody left anything in here for me to eat. And you go to the refrigerator and you open it up, and what? Your favorite drinks are inside, and they're in date. Are you serious? Could you imagine that? That's crazy. You go over to the cabinet, and there's like fresh bread in there. You're like, whoa, hold on a minute. This does not make sense. You see all those things, and everything is the stuff that you love and that you enjoy. Would you think that that just happened to occur out of circumstance, out of just, random chance? Absolutely not. It means that somebody was there who ultimately knew that you would come at some point in time and prepared the place for you. So think about it. If it's been fine-tuned, then it points to the fact that there was or is a fine-tuner. If we don't have time to discuss it tonight, but hopefully sometime in the near future I'll be able to give you a list. But the reality is, did you know that if the distance between the Earth and the Moon were off much at all, that we would probably be absorbed by tides, by the tidal waves? Because if you didn't know this, the Moon actually helps control our tides and how the water moves in and out, and how there's high tide and low tide. That's all based on the Moon. Did you know that if the Earth spun slightly slower on its axis, that we would roast during the day and that we would freeze at night? Pretty crazy to be thinking about that. But yet we have something that is maintaining our temperature so that we can survive here on Earth. Think about this. Did you know that if the Earth were tilted at any more or any less, that we would have that same problem? Pretty crazy when you think about it. Notice that the third planet from the sun happens to be the only one with current life upon it that we know of. Isn't that amazing that it would be so fine-tuned and tweaked that we would be able to exist? Guys, listen, fine-tuning points to a fine-tuner and points to ultimately a designer who began all of these things. Now, there are three things I want to point out in an example with this. There are three different things. The first one is necessity. The necessity of those things. Sorry, I'm getting my things right there. Necessity points to the fact. Necessity points to the fact that we were able to actually be here. That they just have to be this in order to be able to do that. The constants could have been different. And if so, the laws of nature would be different as well, which would make complex life impossible. Life has to be this way because it has to be that way. Necessity of life, and the necessity of everything being the way that it is. Now, that doesn't point us to the fact that there's not a designer or a creator. It just points us to the fact that it had to be this way. The second thing that we see, again, for explanations, is that it happened by random chance. You think about it this way. Perhaps we as people and as a creation got incredibly lucky. We hit the jackpot, and two atoms collided in space millions of years ago, and those two rocks then turned into whole formations and whole planets and started a chain reaction that created planets and stars and Earths and not Earths, but planets. Sorry, got to use the wrong word. But everything, including Pluto, got everything to be where it is. Can you imagine just what an incredibly huge game of chance that would be, and how really lucky we are that would be the case? When you get to thinking about again, it's very improbable that this would have all happened by random chance. The third thing that we see is that the third possibility that we have is that it could have been by a designer. That it could be the way that it is because we have a designer who fine-tuned the universe so that we could be here. I think that's the best solution that we have. You think about it, necessity. If everything were off, then we wouldn't be here, right? You think about probability or chance. You think about what an incredible chance it is. I'm fairly lucky at some things, but y'all, I can't even imagine hitting the jackpot the way that we have. To have the earth that we have, to have the sun and the moon and the stars, to have water and air and all the different things that we have in this world, to have the ability to think and even comprehend these things. The fact that could all come about by random chance is a very small chance in my book. The third option, or the third explanation, truly to me makes the most sense. And I think it's important that we kind of keep that within that framework. Well, you may say, Alan, wait a minute. What about the objections to that? And say, oh, well, it's important for us to address the objections. Why? Because you're going to have people that don't agree with you. And like I said at the very beginning of the video, remember, even when you have people that don't agree with you, we still need to make sure that we respond and talk to them in such a way that they can see Christ in us, and that we can have a reasonable discussion and have the opportunity to share Jesus with them. Even if you have to tell them, hey, look, you raised some great questions. Let me go think about that and do some reading, and let's get back together. That is a very grace-filled way to address that. I sure would hate to win an argument but lose an opportunity to share Jesus with someone. But rather, I'd rather show Jesus to someone and lose the argument that I'm in right now, or pause the argument that I'm in right now. Hey guys, being a Christian doesn't mean we're out to argue and make our point known so that we can be the winners. Being a Christian means that we are saved by grace through faith, and that everybody needs to know Jesus. And so it's way more important that we share Jesus with them, not only with the words that we speak, but the way that we speak them. All right? So here are a couple of arguments that people give, a couple of objections that people give to the idea of an intelligent designer. One is this anthropic principle. I'm going to say that again. The anthropic principle, or the man-centered principle. And this principle states that we shouldn't be surprised that we live in a finely tuned universe, since if it weren't finely tuned, we wouldn't be here to observe it. Think about that. If it weren't finely tuned, we wouldn't be here. So they're just saying, look, we shouldn't be surprised by this. We should just be thankful for it, because guess what? Whether it's by random chance or whatever, we're here. This is an argument that some people use, but it still doesn't explain why we're here or how we got here. If you think about it, it doesn't explain either one of those things. It merely just says we shouldn't be surprised by the fact that we are here. Duh, way to state the obvious. But I think it's important that we look at it this way. Sean gives us the example of a man who goes before a firing squad, right? And his hands are tied, he's blindfolded, and the firing squad gets out there for him. And, you get that moment, he's like just waiting and grinning, and, oh, is this going to hurt? I don't know. And then all of a sudden you hear, pow, 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 pow. But then he goes, I'm still here. Why am I still here? And you would think about it this way. Not many people would be worried too much about why they're not there. They should be surprised that they are still there. They would start thinking more along the lines of, well, I guess those were blanks. I guess somebody's messing with me. I guess I'm still here for a purpose. The reality is that there's a fine-tuning of our universe. It points to the fact that there's somebody with a purpose and a plan for us to still be here, and for the universe to be as fine-tuned as it is. The second objection people have, brace yourselves, Marvel fans, is for the multiverse. People are like, well, we exist in a universe that is part of ultimately many, 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 many multiple universes. Great. That's good and all, but two objections to that objection, and say so in love. One, I don't think we really have a whole lot of evidence for that, other than the Marvel movies, which are fun to watch, but the reality is they're not scientifically proven. So we can look at it from that perspective and say, all right, cool, I'll give you that, but we don't really have evidence for that, do we? And so you can kind of go down that road. But then the second thing to think about is, look, just because we are one universe in the midst of billions and billions of universes, still points to the fact that someone had to create it. Makes it even that much more complex, right? It means that somebody had to design the many, many, many universes that ultimately we find ourselves upon, or find ourselves in. It actually takes it up even another notch, saying, wow, look how complex the creator had to be able to engineer and work all of this out in a way that would work together. Think about it. It's pretty crazy. All right, so moving on from that, I want us to look at this one last thing here and say, okay, Alan, those are all good and everything. What else do you got? Well, look at the last thing that we have, and that's DNA. Or if you ever watch Zootopia, Dunna, right? If you haven't watched Zootopia, go watch it. It's a pretty funny little movie. But he talks about it's in your Dunna, right? Your DNA. Guys, do you realize just how complex DNA really is? I mean, that's one of the things that just blows my mind. But if you think about it, DNA is a series of genetic codes that ultimately tell our cells how they should reproduce, what they should do, and how they should be. They are like little complex machines that are inside of us, all code read and enacted upon by our bodies. You think about it, that's super complex. You think that's a just accident that it happened to be that way? I don't think so. In my office, I have this really cool little picture, and I should have a picture of it, hopefully right over here or over here. I don't know. Wherever I happen to be standing. Maybe I'm going to do it there. I don't know. But it says life is good. I actually have two of them. One that says life is good, and another one says life is gooder. And it's written on the beach. Now, if I walked up on the beach and I saw that, I probably wouldn't think, that's really weird. I can't believe the waves put that here. That happened by random stance. No. I'm going to look at it and go, I wonder what Cletus actually wrote Life is Gooder, because that's kind of funny. I am the one that wrote it because I had someone in North Carolina who used to always say gooder all the time. So I made that for him, and I made that for Shanna and I so that we could have it and remember and laugh and enjoy that. I see that writing, it points us to that there was an author. There was someone who wrote that. The fact that we have DNA, and we have very complex DNA, genetic code, perfect but yet imperfect at times, points us to the fact that there was someone who designed that and created that and wrote that message so that we could be here, so that we could be in existence. A couple of things from the Bible that I want us to see at the very end of this, and I hope you'll follow along with me on that. And one further reminder too. Hey guys, science is constantly evolving and constantly changing. Don't be afraid of that. It's the reality that science is based on observation, and we're constantly able to see more than we have in the past. We've got tools and ways to explore things that we didn't used to have. And I think it's really a great thing that we can continue to do that. So don't look at science and say, we can never agree with science. Look at science and say, I'm just waiting on science to find out what we already know. Because the reality is, science usually comes around in agreement with what God has created. It's a way of explaining, not away God, but pointing us back towards God and explaining the world that he created. So a couple things I want you to see, and this comes from Psalm 8, and I think this is a good way to start. Psalm 8 says this, verse 4, "What is man that you take thought of him? And what is the Son of Man that you care for him?" Wow, we have purpose because we have a designer who created us and give us purpose and give us an opportunity to live and be here. The other thing I want you to see is actually from Psalm 139 and verse 14. Guys, check this out. Oops, hang on. Psalm 139. See, I even marked my Bible, but even then it's so hard. King David writes these words as he's thinking about creation, and he's thinking about how God created him and all that he's done. He said this, "I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well." Hey guys, look, the heavens are declaring or telling of the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. Psalm 19:1. Never forget that you are created by a creator, and that creator has a plan and a purpose for you. When you doubt, seek him. When you are just overwhelmed by the world that you're in, go out and be overwhelmed by the creation that our creator has created. Listen, don't judge him by the decisions of man. Judge him by who he is and what he has done. Listen, I hope y'all have a great discussion in your small group today. I look forward to catching back up with you guys. I'm looking forward to seeing y'all again. I hope you've had a great fall break if you're already on fall break. But if you're getting ready to start fall break, I hope you have an amazing fall break. So I look forward to talking to you soon. Hope you guys have a great night. See you.